skills. Selecting colours, identifying shapes, and taking you step by step with how I copy this from one of my favourite artists is what I'll be sharing with you today, as well as what it taught me so I could paint something like this. If this is something you'd like to see me do more of again, I'd really appreciate your like or comment letting me know. Devin Elle Kurtz has been one of my favourite artists for the longest time. I admire a lot her use of colours, landscapes and characters that create a detailed story within one painting that always leaves a lasting impression. They're all traits I hope to one day reach a similar level at in my own art. If looking at her artwork doesn't tell you immediately that she's an extremely skilled artist with many years of practice under her belt, her extensive portfolio with many credentials truly showcases how much of a master at her practice she is. So for all of those reasons and then some, I chose her to be the artist I'm studying today, as an example to show to you what you can accomplish. When it comes to choosing which piece you should do a copy study of, it can be as simple as really liking the piece, even if you can't pinpoint what, or you can go into the choice looking for a specific trait in that painting you want to improve at in your own work. Now I love everything about Devin's work, but I chose to specifically look for a piece that had structures or buildings, as they're an area I'm lacking at and want to improve on. But before I get into the study and how you can do your own, why should you learn from other artists' work instead of photo references? Copy studies of another artist's work can offer a lot more information that can be useful when learning how to paint something new that photo references just don't have, as the first artist has already done all the work translating the reference into easier digested shapes, brushstrokes and colours. You don't have to do the guesswork, which allows you to focus on taking everything in and experiencing the joy of creating something new with less frustration. That said, you should combine doing photo reference studies with artist studies to optimise your growth, because other artists also make mistakes which you'll unintentionally pick up. So definitely do your artist copy studies, but don't rely on them, and definitely don't plagiarise. If you're going to post them anywhere, make sure to always credit the original artist. Now you know why, let's get to the real reason you clicked onto this video: how. To get us started, I'm going to be breaking another rule you've heard at least once as an artist. Don't trace. As an artist who's been practicing observation a long time, I can already do this shape breakdown in my head when using references. So I want you to go ahead and physically trace all the general shapes you can see. It will then make creating the piece of work really easy, as instead of focusing on all the detail like you can see in the windows, now you just have the shapes to focus on. This will also provide visual aid as to what shapes you need to be creating when you get your study started, so we're not going to be using this as our sketch. Already I'm a little out of my comfort zone because I don't typically do sketches. I've gotten so good at identifying shapes I can usually just go straight in. But everybody works differently, so for visual aid and the sake of trying to learn something new, I will be trying to sketch. By comparing my sketch to those traced shapes, I'm actually a bit surprised at how similar they are. You can also see I overcorrected when fixing the height of the roof, so I'll go back in and fix that quickly. Luckily, I think it's mostly in the tower's proportions. I'm pretty happy with this as my starting point. Let's get to putting some colours down. This is where you can sometimes go wrong when doing an artist copy, as it's easy to just colour pick from the reference and call it a job well done. There's a big problem with doing that if you're trying to understand how your artist uses colour. You won't understand the relationships the colours have with each other, and you'll miss out on a lot of the knowledge that comes with finding those colours yourself. For example, if you colour pick from all the way up here, it's not going to be the same colour as a little bit down here. And then again, even further down, it's all completely different. So while it's really good you can see that this is a blue, we need to know what sort of blue it is. And while this is a good base, I used no brain capacity to figure it out, so I'm not learning much from it, which is why I want you to try and pick the colours yourself. It doesn't have to be an exact match. You can see a lot of colour picking is just a guessing game. Something I see a lot in Devin's work that relates to colours is all the texture. It adds more colour variety. I personally also really like textured paintings. I already have a textured overlay to use as a little cheat code, so I'm going to just apply that real quick. This textured overlay is also free to download in my shop. Import it, put it onto overlay. Sometimes it needs more grain, so I just add a pinch more noise. And you can see the difference that's made. Another thing I'm also picking up from looking at Devin's work, specifically this piece, is her use of underpainting techniques, especially in the tower's roof. If you know what you're looking for, you can tell brown patches have been painted on over the orange, and the orange is peeping out, compared to painting the orange details over the brown. Now this is going to be very time saving, so I'm going to try and mimic this technique to add to my toolkit. I am combining a little bit of my own process with this study, simply because I know my way around my own process and I like how it works. If you're a complete beginner, and if you can find a speed paint or something to reference as to how the specific artist you're studying works, that will be super useful because they all have their different processes. And by following their process more closely, you might find something that they do that you completely love. It's how I picked up my own style or process in a way. And I've reached a point where I'm very, very happy and confident with my process, so I'll be sticking to it a bit within this piece. Of course, whilst combining what I can see Devin doing and trying to emulate her art style. So I just finished colour blocking and I'm really happy so far with how this is looking. And I'm just going to quickly demonstrate what I think Devin is doing here with the roof. You can see there's orange peeking through, but instead of making it all this colour and then going in to paint the orange on, what we're going to do is paint the squares on as we see them. Another thing you can notice Devin doing is towards the edges of this building's roof, as the planes are getting thinner because they're further away. Instead of doing across brush strokes, we're now going up and down. These things that I've noticed are just 2 examples as to how I want you to look at the artist you're studying, as you won't only be picking up new techniques, but you'll also be working on your observation skill, which is super important as an artist and you'll find yourself using anytime you look at a reference. I'm pretty happy with what I've got so far, so I'm going to go finish this study and then I'll bring it back to you. I'm back, but I just want to add another moment to quickly showcase some specific extra information you'll only get by doing an artist study instead of using a photo reference. Because you can see Devin here has done circular brush strokes to show the roundness of the object, and these dappled highlights offer some texture information. This is something you wouldn't get from a photo, you would have to figure out how to translate that yourself. I just finished up the study and I'm so happy with how it came out. I don't paint buildings often because they terrify me, sometimes even bore me with all the straight lines, but I'm actually really proud of myself for this piece and getting through it without the boredom. I did deliberately leave the subjects out to focus on the building aspect as it's supposed to be a learning study, and I've already spent 3 hours on it, so if I included the subjects I'd probably be here for another 3 hours. It's a day later and I'm sat, I've got a sketch ready, I've chosen a reference, my canvas is good to go, all I have to do is start. You may notice that I'm continuing with sketching despite not often sketching myself. It's simply because I found it very helpful when it came down to getting a building drawn up, as sketching helps a lot with perspective, which I don't often find myself needing when I'm doing more natural themed backgrounds. So I'm continuing to do it with the building I am drawing today because it requires a bit more structured perspective. I still have the study I did of Devin's work fresh in my mind, and I'm still thinking a lot about it in this piece. I specifically chose this reference for several reasons, one of them being I picked up during the study I did that I liked doing roofs and the details found on them. So by skipping out the very rectangular buildings like the ones that were at the bottom of the study that I found myself procrastinating, I will hopefully be more engaged in the piece, preventing frustration as much as possible so that hopefully I will be motivated to paint buildings again. Another reason I chose this reference is the colour palette. It's very similar to the colour palette in Devin's piece, so the extra similarities will make creating the piece even easier as I already understand how these colours will work in this environment, instead of really chucking myself in at the deep end with a different colour scheme like green and purple. What I want to talk about whilst sharing with you my study is everything that I learned doing the artist study on Devin Elle Kurtz, because learning that I like and don't like painting certain building aspects is just the tip of the iceberg as to everything I was taught, and I'm hoping you can learn a similar amount by doing your own artist studies now that you know how to. I learned how to use underpainting techniques. I learned more about implied detail and how it can also be used in plain view, in bricks for example. A huge thing that I learned from observing and copying Devin's work is that clean lines and silhouettes are really important in building drawings. Devin often achieves these clean boundaries by using the lasso tool, which I'm simply just not as skilled at using yet. But I found my workarounds by using alpha lock layers and clipping masks. That said, the lasso tool would make a great addition to my tool belt as an artist. It's something else to work on whilst I'm trying to learn how to draw buildings. Touching more on what I said about implied detail a second ago, I also learned that despite these clean silhouettes and lines, there's still room for mess, especially within areas that need textures such as brick. I used a lot of small scribbles for these roof shingles. Possibly the biggest lesson for me was the process when it comes to buildings has to be trusted, which seems a bit obvious now, but it makes sense. Drawing something new is scary and ugly until it isn't, because you push through all of that and now the drawing is sat in front of you just about finished. Speaking of, I'm almost finished with my own study, but it's still looking empty, so it's time to add a subject. Another thing I factored in when choosing my reference was the idea of a subject hanging off one of these towers, so I wouldn't be grasping at straws trying to fill empty space. A creature of sorts perched atop would just look perfect. I'm going to go with a dragon because I always go with dragons. To round us off in the last portion of this video, I really want to hammer home how important it is to do your own practice after doing an artist study. You pick up a lot when doing an artist study, and you need to put those new skills to practice. And by implementing them into your own work, not only do you get that practice, but you'll also be translating them into your own process, your own language in a way, achieving the slightest bit of muscle memory, as well as getting to focus on the specific parts of the study that you liked to do. Honestly, liking what you're drawing or learning to draw is the biggest factor into whether or not you'll improve. You can only draw the same thing that you don't like for so long before just giving up completely and deciding that you don't want to draw ever again. So I want you to be really aware of what you do and don't like when you are drawing. And remember, what you like drawing and what you like looking at can be two completely different things. I still have a little way to go in terms of being able to draw buildings, but this practice has put me on the right path, and I'll continue to share my attempts at drawing buildings on my Instagram. I might even make a follow-up video. But for now, I'm really happy with the study and how it came out. Compared to the buildings I was drawing prior to this study, I've improved a long way. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you go and do your own artist study after this. And a huge thank you to Devin Elle Kurtz, who gave me permission to make this study and this video.